G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you, and our guest today is Matthew de la Fuente, CEO of KYAX and former director at Celsius. KYAX, in his current role, brings institutional-grade crypto reporting to support tax, accounting, bookkeeping, audit, and regulatory solutions to Web3 companies. Matthew brings a wealth of operational experience as a builder and from C-suite from both outside and inside Web3 companies. We're really excited to be chatting with Matthew today, talking about operations, talking about regulation, talking about blockchain, and the intersection of all three with artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about money, the philosophy of money. What is it? We're going to talk about government and a bit of philosophy about government as well. It's a really interesting conversation. I hope you enjoyed this chat with Matthew de la Fuente. Matthew, firstly, if we could just start with, what's your origin story? How'd you get started in Web3? Did you come at it from an ideological place? Did you come at it from a technological place? Did you come at it from a financial place? How'd you get interested in Web3?
Sure. So I first heard about crypto in 2015, 2016. And I thought it was the most silly, stupid thing you could imagine, because what government would ever allow something like cryptocurrency to take off? They would tax it out of existence, and then they would ban it, and they would punish anybody who engaged with it. Turns out I was wrong, obviously. And basically, I was experimenting with it in around 2017, 2018. I had my rug pulls, I had my ridiculous investments, I had the thefts, I had the hacks. It was a great time. Don, I feel like if you haven't had those, you probably haven't been in crypto long enough.
Yeah, I'd say that. Especially, I mean, maybe not especially, but especially back in those days, or maybe we just got a bit more wise to them in the last couple of years, perhaps. Yeah, well, I mean,
yep.
Yeah. You say,
and then,
go on.
No, go ahead.
And then, sorry, yeah.
And then what happened was I had been in and around Silicon Valley and specialized in growing and scaling businesses, mainly SaaS businesses, nearly always VC or PE backed. And while I was there, I was recruited by Celsius Network, and I was their second operations hire. And my job was to build and scale the business. We're talking about systematically building what became a $30 billion asset manager, probably the second most complex crypto business on the planet. And, as I got deeper into building different pieces of Celsius, I just got more and more enamored, both with building crypto businesses specifically, but also all of the different asset classes, all of the different programs and types of crypto assets that have developed. And honestly, I couldn't imagine going anywhere else at this point.
So what kinds of things are you working on at the moment? What does it look like for you now, having come at it from that starting point to what you're working on at the moment? And then we can talk about, what you're excited about for the future. But in terms of right now, what are you working on?
Sure. So what I'm working on is a company called KYAX, which stands for Know Your Assets and Transactions. And one of the things that I did was go around about 100 CEOs, COOs, and CFOs in crypto, from some of the biggest names to some of the smaller ones. And I asked them, what is the biggest, most challenging problem that you have that you don't want to build for? and that was business and regulatory reporting. And so that is something that KYAX now provides to crypto businesses.
Right. So one of the things that you mentioned before, like when you first heard about Web3 or blockchain, was you're thinking, what government is possibly going to allow this? And now what you're doing is actually helping people to remain compliant or do things in a legal kind of way. Is that a good way of putting it?
So Don, I'm going to tell you 100% of our customers are not in jail.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good standing point for any company, especially one in your business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so
Don, look, philosophically, I truly believe that this new wave, this Web3, is the future. Not only that, but I really, really believe it is exactly where our entire wave of technology needs to go. And anything that I can do to give it breathing room, to allow the governments to not crush it, crush the companies, or crush the people building it, I will do.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I mean, what does the crushing look like then in terms of what's at risk, or how is Web3 at risk at the moment?
Well, crushing, I think, looks like the US. It looks like the systematic debanking of the industry. It looks like the personal prosecution of individuals who, you or I may see as not having done anything particularly negative relative to the punishments that they're going to get. And in that context, I specifically talk about Coinbase. We look at how the SEC is relating to crypto. We look at how in the past, the People's Republic of China has engaged with crypto. This is really, really tough. These are tough environments that I really, really hope to help companies navigate.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I mean, so I've been around crypto for a number of years now, and it seems that there's kind of back in 2017, 18, it might have been, there's the ping pong of China going, we're for crypto, and then we're banning it, and then we're back on again, and then we're banning it, and then it's been banned for a while, and now all of a sudden Hong Kong's like, well, maybe we'll welcome some people, and then similarly the US, we're like, yeah, we want it, we're the capital of innovation in the world, we're all about it, and then, oh no, we're really fearful about it, and then sometimes it seems like the SEC, who are trying to, or at least vocalizing that they're trying to protect regular investors, that seems to be the case. And then another time it's about, well, what about the money? And it's about security, and it's about, a more overarching kind of worry. And then some jurisdictions seem to be super pro, some jurisdictions seem to be super anti. It seems like a really and the trajectory at this stage, at least in the middle of 2023, seems to be that they're becoming more and more anti-crypto or anti-Web3 in general. If you say Web3 is the future, and certainly I think Web3's got a massive future and a lot to offer, how can the US in particular overcome some of its, not just hesitation, but antagonism towards Web3?
So I tend to look at questions like this on multiple levels. So let's take the very first level, which is regulators are people too. They have needs, philosophies, strategies, and desires. Okay? And I believe Gary Gensler has a genuine antipathy for cryptocurrencies. I'm not sure where that comes from. I think he's actually quite a fan of blockchain, not a fan of what the digital asset community has done with it.
Right.
The next piece is that the SEC and the CFTC are now locked in a battle. They're locked in a battle for ownership, for future revenues, for prestige. Then, on top of that, you've got a US election cycle, which means nothing is going to get resolved for at least 2 years. There's going to be no decision from the SEC for years. Okay? Then, within that, you have a genuine, reasonable, and understandable battle for the future of money. Let's say the big TradFi institutions on one side, and the more upstart entities like Coinbase on the other. And underlying all of this is a real, genuine conversation about the future of money and the future of the dollar in particular. Now, Don, I know that this will be no surprise to everyone who's listening to this, but, crypto is still denominated in dollars. 99%, probably over 99% of all stablecoin transactions are done in US dollars. There is no threat to the US dollar at the moment in this space. However, there is a huge threat to the fiat dollar in this space, because with a blockchain-based stable coin that's based on the dollar, you can see exactly how many dollars there are. And this leads us into the CBDC conversation. But the fact remains is that the fiat dollar is the United States superpower, the ability to inflate away their debt.
Yeah.
The ability to essentially print money until they can afford something, to degrade other people's debt, really, really distort and damage other people's economy without really touching their own. It's one of the greatest powers of the United States as a country. And a lot of crypto threatens that. Now, full disclosure, I am not convinced that many people in US government are thinking along all of those lines. But what it does do is aligns a lot of people organically against this space. And I think that that's probably more likely what's happening.
Gotcha. So is there any way to be able to just call up Gary and say, hey, Gary, it's not a problem and here's why? Or what, what's the barrier?
Don, that's the issue. The issue is that digital assets, crypto, are a threat to the United States.
Yeah.
They have to really make a decision as a country. Do we fight this and try and retain our supremacy, retain our superpowers, so to speak, or do we lean into this and potentially accelerate our own decline? It's not like there's an easy answer here. These are really, really tough answers. And the United States is actually acting reasonably with those frames.
Yeah, gotcha. At what point does it become like, the with any kind of technological advance where the people who hold back because they're trying to protect, I think of things like, in my city, it's probably like this in many jurisdictions around the world, the classic case of Uber coming in, and before a taxi license was incredibly valuable. And so they fought to protect that incredibly valuable asset. And it was super valuable until all of a sudden it was not at all valuable, versus somehow getting on board with the new thing that's happening, or embracing the technological change and in some sense being at the forefront of it. Or, the classic Kodak, situation as well. There are many examples of this kind of thing. Is the US just going to be a nation state version of Kodak? They seem too big for that.
I mean, honestly, Don, I think that's a really, really interesting analogy. And I want to say the easiest thing to do is look back in history. How long did it take Rome to collapse? Not very long. How long did it take the Soviet Union to collapse? Not very long. How long did it take the British Empire to collapse? Not very long. These things seem like they're going to last forever until the week that they don't.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, each of those had a pretty long tail, but yeah, you're right. In terms of supremacy, I mean, it's a quick one. Well, I mean, from that kind of existential perspective, then what's the game theory for the United States, if we can put it in those terms? What are they?
Yeah. So, it's a really, really great question. So what does the US want to do? It wants to retain its primacy. It wants to retain its top spot. Primacy, yeah. There you go. It wants to retain its top spot in the financial, military system. But it's losing a lot of the levers that supported the previous system. We're talking all the way back to Bretton Woods. And when you look at the global regulatory regime, it is in fact crypto Web3 that is eating away at all of the old structures.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a reason it took many, many hours, many, many days to move money between countries. Okay? It was in everybody's interest to do that was at the top of the pile, because you could take cuts, you could leverage that money as it was moving, you could create the fiat system, which, classifies countries according to the risks and the controls that they have in place. Some of this was great. Some of this was a real step forward in the maturation of our financial system. I truly believe that Web3 crypto is in fact the next step of maturation. The issue is that it's a big threat to all of the existing infrastructure. It's a big threat to all of the existing players. It's a big threat to all of the existing cash flow system. And I want to index on that, Don. If you look at how cash flows work, if you think about cash flows as power flows, you begin to realize just how much of a threat this is to everybody.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, so in that case, where does the CBDC, or central bank digital coin, digital currency, does this solve or salve that problem at all? Is that a bridge between here and there for the United States or for any state, for example?
I think it's a really, really, I think it's a really, really interesting question. And I want to just take a moment, Don, to talk about the different types of CBDCs, because I feel like lots of people have lots of different CBDCs in their head when we talk about this. So let's go through this. So you've got a wholesale CBDC that is offered by a market provider that allows for intra-bank reconciliation, intra-bank settlement. That seems like a relatively good idea, okay? The ability for banks to settle their transactions on-chain, I don't see a real problem with that. Do you, Don?
No, I don't think anyone would have a problem with that, actually.
Okay.
I can't think of
Great. Yep. Then you could have a wholesale-based intra-bank stablecoin provided by a government. Again, I don't really see a problem or a threat with that. Done?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Well, so
Right.
the only thing maybe would be ideologically in that it would step the banks towards crypto, perhaps. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Well, hold on. Just to take a little detour, well over 5% of intra-bank transfers in the United States are already done using stablecoins. And so, while everyone's been talking about this crypto crackdown, CBDCs are already mainlined into the intra-bank system in the United States, specifically like focused on blockchain technology. So it's kind of already there. There's a JPM coin, for goodness sake, Don.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that,
right?
For me, that's been one of the most, not ironic, but hilarious developments. Has been actually, in as much as, we talked about the US and China going back and forth on it, even just JPM going back and forth has been, or even publicly going back and forth, all the while privately, engaging in it pretty extensively has been very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. So they're two kinds.
Right? No. That's just two. Now we're going to go one level deeper. Okay. Well, what about a government-backed CBDC? Okay. That was retail, that everyone was allowed to use. And it was, in fact, public. That would be a real, that would be possibly okay. Okay? Then you could have a retail government-focused CBDC that was private. So you couldn't see what people had done on chain.
Yeah.
Okay? Then you could have a private company issuing private CBDC. Okay? Then you could have a private company like Circle issuing a retail CBDC that was public, available for everyone to know. Okay? And then overlaying on every single one of those options, you have a control option, which is, does the government or does the entity that has issued that CBDC have the ability to turn on and off money? Does it have the ability to turn your money on and off? Does it have the ability to control where you're spending things? And I would surmise that the People's Republic of China will go with a retail CBDC where it is private to everyone but the government, but it has elements of control. So they will turn on and off where you can spend that money. And I would assume that in the People's Republic of China, they will monitor where you're spending your money. And remember, they already have their social matrix of control through their social media. And so they will be able to govern where, when, how you move, you eat, you spend your money, you meet with. And that, in my opinion, is the Black Mirror situation. And what I mean by Black Mirror, for those who don't know, is that's the dystopia that I think a lot of people are understandably concerned about.
Yeah, but there are a lot of advantages for a central government to have such a device like that. For example, I'm just thinking about even in recent years where the United States has wanted to put sanctions on certain countries. If they had the ability to kind of turn it off and on like a tap or a faucet, who could use their money, or even if they knew which wallets held or whose wallets held which money and they could freeze those, like happens with known scam accounts, say with USDC these days, that would be a big positive from a government perspective, not from a resident perspective or a citizen's perspective or from a business perspective or from a non-dystopian perspective, but certainly from a government's perspective, I can see them wanting something like this, or even just, again, like you said, it's private. So I can't see your wallet. I can't see how you're spending your money, but the government might be able to see how you're spending your money, not so that they can prevent you from spending your money, but perhaps for a more stringent tax system. I could see that being advantageous for a federal government, for example, being able to know exactly how much of your money you've spent and where, and what's being deducted and those kinds of things. What are some of the positives from a citizen and a business perspective, perhaps, to having a CBDC that's not one of those kinds? So what would be the best in your, if we're going to have one to rule them all, or at least one that's mostly used, or if the USD in terms of fiat is still the main denominator for currency in the world, what would the US version of a central bank currency look like that's going to actually be useful and provide for liberty for people?
So, Don, look, it's a fantastic, big philosophical question. I would reframe it to you, which is, if money is power, how much power do you want to give your elected representatives? And for every citizen, that response is going to be different.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at an impasse then. We can't do it. Well, how would you?
Well, no. Look, the fact is that in the United States, you have incredible diversity of opinion and diversity of philosophies. If you've ever spoken to someone from New Hampshire or Texas, and then gone to someone from Massachusetts or California, you're going to find a huge diversity of philosophies around governmental control and intervention.
Yeah.
Okay. And with regards to that, it's really, really interesting. These folks have genuine disagreements that are founded on real philosophical differences.
Yeah.
And whereas Massachusetts is more comfortable with government intervention and protections and control, Texas is not. And so where Texas will fight against any type of government control, any type of government-issued CBDC, Massachusetts will likely look to leverage the benefits of it. And these are, again, some of those multi-layered pieces of thinking that I recommend everyone do when they're engaging with these questions.
Yeah, okay. So it's really it's as fraught or diverse as political opinion is anyway. So if you could put it on a single spectrum, for example, if you could do that and have like a very libertarian folks on the one side and very like pro-government control, like let's just pack everything into the government over here and let them kind of rule and run our lives. Is there anywhere on that spectrum where, most of the people that I tend to interact with in the Web3 space tend to be more on the libertarian end, at least some aspects of their, philosophy towards politics is at that end of the spectrum, tends to be, not invariably, but tends to be. And so we're talking about Web3 or blockchain, for example, people would tend to be more at that end of the spectrum. How, man, I don't even know, how could it be a possibility? I can see people on this end going, yeah, we can do it, whereas people on the other end are the ones who want to do it. And so it seems to me that it's inevitable, but I'm not sure how it's going to happen.
So, you're talking to someone who thought Dogecoin was a joke. You're talking to look, it's a multi-billion-dollar joke. It's not a joke.
Yeah, sure.
So, with crypto, I have kind of given up on predicting the future.
Sure.
with regards to the way forward, the place whereby everybody on a US spectrum could agree, I think that there's space at the institutional wholesale level where banks are allowed to use some type of CBDC. I don't think that that's a particular threat to anyone or anything. I think that's just making the system better, faster, cheaper. Okay? I think that the moment you touch retail, you're in a really challenging space that actually ends up in a political argument. And the US has not, over the past 20 plus years, been in a good place in terms of finding compromise ways forward.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, if anything, it seems like that's becoming more of a problem. They're getting more kind of divergent on that, being able to work together kind of aspect, or people are becoming more politically, tribally entrenched and less willing to even communicate, let alone, cooperate across the aisle, if you like, or across the political spectrum. What do you think? How do you think artificial intelligence then impacts either the regulatory landscape, or does it impact fiat, or how's it going to impact self-executing smart contracts and those kinds of things? If we're thinking about the future of money, just put a pin in the central bank digital currencies for a second. How is AI impacting this conversation?
It's a great question. So originally, I wasn't so convinced that crypto would touch or be integrated with AI, but recent events have really changed my opinion of that. So if the next wave of the internet is the metaverse, and the native currency of the metaverse will be digital assets, will be crypto. And if the future of money is, well, if the current system of money is based on contracts, then essentially what we have is a bunch of Lego blocks that we can arrange like this. So if the next wave of the internet is metaverse based.
Yep.
If people are transacting in the metaverse, they will be transacting likely with cryptocurrencies, and they will be executing a lot of contracts between each other in the metaverse, online, going forward. Then you will need AI to build those smart contracts. And the more AI you have, the more AIs that are talking to each other, the more smart contracts you will need. And therefore, you will see the continued embedding of smart contracts in particular, but cryptocurrency into the financial transactional system. And I think we can already see the start of it in the gaming industry, where you have AI bots competing with normal human beings for pots of money in gambling, for pools in games where the winner takes all, and so on and so forth. The more AI you have, the more smart contracts you have, the more smart contracts you have, the more cryptocurrency, digital assets, usage, transactions you have.
Gotcha. So you need smarter contracts, more of them, more agents, if you like, talking to each other and interacting and transacting with one another. And so it actually becomes we're talking about the World Wide Web. That strikes me as an incredibly complex and continually, ever increasingly complex web of interactions and transactions. It's inextricable actually trying to take away AI once AI is in there, you can't get it out.
Yeah, I think that that's a fair assumption. I think that, your prior comment, Don, is correct, that we're going into a world, again, that's much faster than we've ever seen. More transactions with more agents, more value being moved around, and we are going to have to build tools, systems, companies that cope with all of that velocity.
Yeah. I mean, let's get to the building of the companies and, building the kind of scaffolding and infrastructure for it. But it strikes me that people don't really understand money now. How are people going to understand money? I mean, will that become more easy to understand money, perhaps? No, it won't. It'll become more complex, won't it?
So here's the thing. Money is really simple to understand, but it is cased in huge amounts of proprietary language designed specifically to keep normal people out.
Sure. To obfuscate.
Then, to obfuscate. Yep. Then on top of that, you have government agencies. My wife was just with a very, very top educator who is designing the future of the education system. And the comment that I take away from that conversation is the education system's job is to build more taxpayers.
Right.
Okay? It is not to create self-sovereign individuals. It is not to educate them on how the financial system works. It is not to educate them on how to build their own business. It is to make them employees, to make them pay the most amount of tax to the government. That is the North Star for the education system.
So that's by design. Are you saying that's what it is, or that's the design?
So that is the intentional design for the next 10 years.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Whether that lasts, I don't know. But the fact is this,
do you think that's ideologically driven, or is this, the increasing average age of people we need to pay for the boomers? So let's get some more tax revenue. Or is this just, what helps society move is people who are compliant and can pay their bills and mine too?
Don, I think the answer is yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Again, when you think about all of the pressures that governments are under, they all lead roughly to the same spot, which is we need more revenue.
So how we're going to understand money going to the future, then, do you think?
So with regards to money in the future, just replace every time you're asking me a question about money with the word power.
Right.
How are we going to replace power in the future? Well, we're not. The people in power will, like this, the institutions in power, the entities, the governments in power will fight to keep that power. And different entities, different institutions, different people will come up with different strategies to engage and deal with it. So I would say the UK, Brexit, make of that what you will, but the UK has a real opportunity to become a crypto hub if it wants to, precisely because its traditional financial power has been damaged.
Right. Well, so it seems to me then that crypto would be a significant threat to any sovereign nation in that case, because there is that ideological bias or predisposition perhaps to decentralization and, me owning my data, me owning my, having my own wallet, banking myself, etc. And it seems the more self-sovereign, and I don't mean that in the politically loaded sense that some people use that term, although I guess it, in the most generic sense is what I mean by that phrase. Seems like that's that's working against the things that you're suggesting the government's actually trying to work towards?
Yeah, look, again, coming back to every institution's situation is unique. El Salvador, weak government, weak monetary power, switched over to Bitcoin to improve its monetary power. And I would argue it's actually done that. Okay, do I suggest every country switch to Bitcoin? Of course not. But those entities with low power in the system, low money in the system, have to balance. Do we engage with the dollar, which is inflationary, which is potentially damaged by the behavior of the US government? Or do we switch to something like Bitcoin, which, for whatever you want to argue against it, has nobody really controlling it?
Yes.
That's a really interesting discussion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's go there then. What prevents a nation from doing that? Other than losing some, I guess, like you said, if the United States wants to inflate their currency, bam, they can just print another $1 trillion. Or if they want to decrease in kind of a real sense their debts, bam, here's another $1 trillion. What's the incentive for a government to do what El Salvador is doing?
Well, Don, just to clarify, in the latest debt ceiling legislation, the US is now allowed to print unlimited money, I think for the next 2 years.
That's nuts.
No, and I legitimately mean that. Unlimited. Like, there's no limit. They can print however much they want, and they will. Part of the reason for that is that they didn't actually know how much they would need to print.
Yeah.
Okay? Because they didn't actually know how their debt would be dealt with. Now, if you are a small country and your native currency has been damaged to the point where it can't really be used functionally, your economy is suffering, then you used to have two different options. You used to have to go to the IMF, World Bank, cap in hand, restructure your native currency, and suffer hugely. Argentina, Zimbabwe, like quite a few countries that just roll off the tongue. But now you have this other option, which is Bitcoinization, which is you can start transacting in a non-controlled currency that is kind of equivalent to digital gold, that supposedly retains its value over time and is relatively straightforward in terms of on and off ramping in many areas of the world. That is a really, really interesting new tool for countries that are in challenging situations to engage with.
Yeah.
But again, going back, it is a real threat to current power. And remember that the US and Europe together really run our banking system. Mm-hmm. And so if both of them agree on a way forward, and both of them agree that Bitcoinization rather than dollarization is a threat, they may choose to block out that entity from the financial system. That is really, really it will be a great indicator of how the US views Bitcoinization, how the US views its declining authority and power.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be that Europe and the US, their take on blockchain has been it's been different over time. They have different incentives, I guess, although they're still, like you say, they're very closely aligned. And I would even include Australia in that, because we are very American/European in both. I mean, perhaps a dominant culture, but also our partners, trading partners. Although we have a lot in Asia as well. But man, if money is power, like we were saying this thing, so the future of money is really the future of power, and distributed money is distributed power, and centralized power doesn't want distributed power; they want centralized power. How can you see those two, if we can say US and Europe together? How can you see them working together? Wouldn't they, again, go back to that Uber example, wouldn't they just be better off saying, okay, Bitcoin as a kind of proof of concept works great. We're rolling out our own Bitcoin. Here it is. Let's go for it.
Yeah, and then we go all the way back to the euro dollar in Europe. And look, this is a world that is fraught with threats, fraught with challenges, and they're not getting any easier. Predicting where all of these different legal, political, regulatory entities are going to go, I'm not a huge fan of that.
Sure.
What we can all do is have open and honest conversations with all of these individuals, these people in these systems, about their objectives and what they want to achieve. Going all the way back to Gary Gensler, I think one of the biggest problems is that nobody really understands what he's trying to achieve.
Right.
I don't think he's protecting retail investors. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, he may be incidentally protecting some retail investors from scams, but he's also blocking a bunch of retail investors who haven't had the same access because they haven't been able to go through the kinds of gatekeepers previously to the kinds of investments that have made people incredibly wealthy. And so that's one of the things that given all of the scams, given all of the fraud and whatnot, there's still been a great democratization to access to a game, I guess. I don't mean a game in terms of something that's inconsequential or frivolous, but I mean it's something that some people have had great access to for a very long time, which has substantially improved their lives. And so even just from that perspective, I think this is something that's worth us pursuing and talking about until we kind of find the answer. If you were to assume best case scenario, Gary has a change of heart. He goes, you know what? Yeah, let's forget the FTX debacle, which he is not involved in. Let's say blockchain gets the green light. What in the modern kind of crypto tech stack, you mentioned before, we need to build companies, we need to build infrastructure, we need the kind of scaffolding to actually make it work. What's missing or what is a mess at the moment that needs some order, in your opinion?
So when you look at the TradFi stack of departments, transactional systems, you see a pretty packed value chain that follows money, follows currency, follows power, all the way from, trading and sales, all the way through to settlement, reconciliation, enterprise systems at the bottom. And when you then take that model and you look at crypto institutions, there's huge areas missing. Like, we only very recently were able to manage invoices in crypto.
Right.
We don't have a system that I'm aware of that manages voting on the blockchain, very much like a corporate action system in TradFi. We're talking about really basic functionality that is just plain missing. And I think the reason for that is that this industry was founded by tech people for tech people, with a, let's say, crypto geek point of view.
Yeah.
At no point were any of those people thinking about the primary use case being financial services. At no point were those people thinking, well, how does a financial institution work with this capital, this money? How do they think about risks? How do they think about liquidity buffers? How do they think about treasury management? They weren't thinking like that. They were thinking, let's build some cool shit.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. They achieved that. That's amazing. We're here because of them. But the issue is that the real next step for this industry will be, can we build a financial institutional stack that can serve people and businesses in a way that allows governments to be accepting of the situation? I firmly believe yes. And what that means is that we have to rethink every aspect of our crypto systems to make sure that they are able to be compliant. They're able to produce real reporting, real data, real governance, and real controls to show to overseers, to regulators, to governments, and the people that we are responsible adults.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, firstly, do you think a CBDC might help fix some of those issues? And secondly, do you think that's why so many founders, being primarily tech-driven, have really kind of ignored or overlooked the regulatory layer? And is that part of the problem from a regulator's perspective, where they see, well, here's just kind of red flags all over the place because they're just not even thinking about the actual financial perspectives or financial aspects of it. They're just thinking of the tech aspects of it. Is that part of the missing link, do you think, there?
I think you're definitely onto something. But on that second comment, it is really, really obvious when talking to some of the OG crypto folks. They're not aware of the system that they're operating inside. One of my favorite thoughts was at ETH Denver, there was a hackathon. And there were quite a few really, really interesting, good projects, CeFi and DeFi, smart contracts, and so on and so forth. But 90% of the projects would go directly to jail because they just simply didn't understand the system that they were operating in.
So they think they're outside the system, right? But they're really inside the system, and then they're not getting it right.
Because again, it's all very well claiming that this is software and technology, but the moment you touch money, you get a money override. Basically, it doesn't matter. Money is power, and the system doesn't like you operating outside of it. Don, with regards to this tech framing, if I have wallet 1 and wallet 2, and I'm just moving a Bitcoin between the two, or I'm moving money or assets between the two, I'm just moving bits between two spaces. It's really not a big deal, right? But hold on. What if that one wallet is based in New Jersey, because I created it randomly when I was at my mum's house, and wallet 2 is in New York because that's where I live, okay? And I'm just moving, money between the two. Well, that's wire fraud, 20 years in prison.
Yeah.
And so there's this real challenge for this entire industry to think through and deal with the fact that what they think is technology is actually money and power.
Yeah, gotcha. Man, that's a big deal. Matthew, there are so many threads that I would love to pull on with the things we've spoken about. I do like to ask though, do you have any particularly contrarian views, or is it something that you think, man, everyone's thinking this way, but I'm really thinking over that way? Anything, not things that would necessarily get you into trouble, but just things that aren't going with the flow so much.
So I believe, I think I thought you would. So I think the fastest way to adoption is actually through the regulators. I believe that the fastest way to get this mainstreamed is to essentially provide every regulator on the planet with a matrix, a framework through which they can be educated and understand that this is essentially just a different way of looking at money. And we can provide the controls, the governance, and the reporting that you are used to from a TradFi perspective. We can be your friends. Because the regulators just want to do their job.
Yeah.
And if we can make their job easier and less threatening and less exotic, then they will come along on the journey with us. That's my firm belief.
Yeah, I mean, and that's evidenced because you're building KYAX, which is trying to do exactly that, like without sounding like a shill here, but that's sweet. It's what you're building as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Matt,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, how can people find out more about KYAX? Where can we find you online and learn more about what you're doing and how what you're doing is actually going to help lead to the future that most people in blockchain and Web3 are trying to go towards? You're just taking, what perhaps is going to be the most direct route there.
So you can find out more information on kyax.com, KYAX.com. You can also see lots of postings on LinkedIn, on Twitter. And Don, it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, you too. Thanks very much for coming again. We'll have to have you back on and kind of pull some of those threads. Or, AI might explode by then and we'll have some other things to talk about, but really, really appreciate your time and your perspective as well. And the fact that you're building the very thing you think is good. Well, and I also believe is going to actually help lead to adoption as well. So good on you for doing that too, man. Really appreciate it and appreciate your time.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Off-Chain Podcast. We love bringing you great guests like Matthew de la Fuente. Hope you've enjoyed and been inspired to learn more about Web3 technology in the future. And as always, please like, subscribe, and better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word and join us again next week for another great episode of the Off-Chain Podcast. Take care.